Well, hello and welcome to this second conversation of a series of a number we don't yet know. This is my good friend, Professor Stanton Reed, and we are continuing our conversations about how Valencia is faring and evolving through this COVID 19 health crisis and what that might mean for our future. Thanks for joining me again.
Hey, I appreciate it. I'm glad we were able to use this Clorox and wipe everything down. And I think we're about 6 feet,
Maybe, maybe.
shy, maybe an inch, maybe.
Well, I'll lean out instead of leaning in.
Okay,
Okay.
that'll work.
So it's been quite a few weeks. I guess close to 40 days since it became clear just how serious this infection issue was and what it was going to mean in the near term for Valencia when we went into 2 weeks of uninterrupted preparation for restarting the semester online. And it's been amazing. More than 4,000 sections moved online. Learning support systems, advising systems, registration, business office, HR, everything has gone remote and online. And though not perfectly, miraculously to me, but what's more important than that is the persons. So you've been in every meeting I've been in, and in lots of conversations I haven't. How do you think the faculty and staff are holding up? How do you think the students are holding up?
I think the faculty and staff overall are holding up fairly well, but I would be remiss if I said everything was great. Staying inside, being quarantined, some by themselves, that's got its own issues. Others with families, homeschooling, adapting to this online arena, it's difficult. And you can see it kind of flare out with sometimes in conversations, people are short. I think with the students, I think they're still trying to navigate how to do this. It's one thing when you're in a dorm and you are able to be out of school,
Hmm.
but all your buddies around so you can, kind of joke and do different things. It's another thing to be quarantined.
Mm.
And I think some students are seeing how much they depend on certain things for granted, like Wi Fi.
Mm.
And so overall, I think everybody is encouraged and will push forward any given day towards a better
Mm.
position. I think we're still kind of navigating, and 40 days kind of makes me, think about there's something to say about 40 days.
It's been a magic number in a lot of traditions.
Yes.
So we'll come back to that conversation about what it feels like, what we're experiencing, because you can't live in crisis all the time. It's human beings were made to respond to crisis. That's what all our cortisol chemistry is all about. But living there is not healthy, and it's so important for us to transition, still in a process of change and adaptation, but not in crisis. So I think that's an important transition for us to make, and we'll be looking to one another to figure out how to make it together.
I agree. Well, with that in mind, I think the curiosity right now is what's summer going to look like? I mean, everybody switched 4 weeks, did what we needed to do, go fully online. How are we doing summer? Summer scheduling? Should people be worried? What exactly is happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me send out all sorts of kudos to the academic administration of the college, the deans, the faculty who do discipline level coordination, the campus presidents, and the academic affairs staff. We had about a week to change a fairly traditional schedule of summer courses into an entirely online schedule. And once again, they worked miracles. They didn't just change modality. Lots of them changed length of course, the way the course is managed. There's lots of other adjustments made. But to create the most access we could create for students through the summer, we still are unable to do hands-on, face-to-face kinds of stuff in most cases, although there are a few exceptions to that. In the interest of public safety, the mayors and the chiefs asked us to continue the academies for public safety professionals, law enforcement, for
Mhm.
example. That's continuing. But other things are mostly on hold for hands-on until it's safe to do that. And we know that that's not likely to be true anytime in the next few weeks. So we've planned the summer to be online. If things change and it's safe enough to bring some people together for face to face work in a limited way in those areas that can only be done that way. We'll experiment with that, but we have yet to sort out exactly what are the decision points, when are they likely to hit, what are the variables that tell us it's safe enough to do that. Meanwhile, we're practicing safe practice. For example, at the School of Public Safety, learning how to rapidly fumigate and clean and make sterile the spaces that they're in, how to distance, social distance in classes there, and so on. So we're learning some, a little limited experiment there about what might happen when we come back. The thing I think people need to know, and I've learned this along the way. I really thought summer would be a soft term,
Mm,
that we would lose enrollment and students would move to the sidelines and wait to see what happens and so on. That's not happened at all. In fact, we may have our largest summer enrollment in history this summer.
hmm
It's caused really by two things, I think. One is the very generous and thoughtful approach to student grading that allowed um, a large number of students to take a kind of withdrawal without penalty called
hmm
R20, meaning retake in 2020. Take those courses in the summer again, withdraw in the spring if it didn't work for them, come back in the summer, take those courses, assuming they're offered in the summer. If they're not, they could probably do that in the fall at no cost. They're all welcome to retake the course. We'll waive the cost for a period of time, certainly the summer term. And some 6,000 students have done that. And so that adds to the summer enrollment significantly. But summer enrollment's up.
Okay.
And that's really leads to a larger conversation, which is what are we trying to get done right
True.
now?
I'm interested with all of that being said and the preparation that you alluding to as far as preparation and cleaning the campus. I'm telling you, makes me think about dollars and cents. So we'll just say the elephant in the room to me is what does a budget look like when I may want Clorox wipes, I may want sanitation liquid, I may want someone to come in and wipe the classroom down. I mean, just so many things we're seeing happening. How and what is being done
Mm.
as it relates to the budget?
Those are good questions. So this is the time of year when we normally be working on a detailed budget for next year to take to the board in May and June. We're a little behind that schedule because we were waiting to understand what the Federal Relief Act would do for us, what kind of resources it provides to backstop college. I'm not anticipating a big budget hit from our normal operations. The big challenge in the budget is international students. So they're contributing substantial revenue to the college, and international student enrollment will, in fact, take a hit. Remember, they pay 4 times the tuition rate that domestic students pay. In
Mm,
fact, all out of
okay.
state students, a student from Kentucky does that too.
All
So
right.
we're trying to understand exactly how much reduction in enrollment in international is going to be caused by this because you can't get an F1 visa right now. Our embassies all over the world are shut down. There's no visa applications being processed. We, in fact, deferred any new admissions of international students through the summer, in part because of that, in part because of safety issues. So we have about somewhere between 80 and 100 international students who are ready to go in the summer. We ask them not to come until fall, when it's safer to travel and makes more sense. Um, so we're not sure how much loss we'll have there. In revenue terms, it's probably something like $4 to $6 million.
Okay.
That's the only significant hit to the budget I'm anticipating.
Okay.
Now, the legislature passed along about $4 million of additional money, almost $5 million in additional money to us. That's not a great year, but it's a good year. On the other hand, they passed through to us some FRS retirement system charges that normally they've paid
Okay.
to the tune of about 1.7 million. So that made a pretty good budget, just an okay budget from the state. That budget hasn't been approved by the governor yet because I think the governor's waiting to see the effects on the larger economy. So it's possible that the state dollars will all disappear as they manage the state's revenue challenges
Mm,
through this. What does all that mean for us? Well, the most important thing to know is that we're facing a significant growth in enrollment over the next year. And that's driven by unemployment claims and all that sort of stuff. So when people lose their jobs or are furloughed, they do just what we ought to want them to do. They go back to school to get more skills so they can be more resilient the next time around. And they're coming to us in huge numbers. And I'm anticipating, just like we had during the Great Recession, substantial growth that adds revenue, um, and makes the budget manageable for a year or two. If the state fails to fund that enrollment, then it gets really tight by the second or third year. But this next year should be relatively manageable.
Okay.
So if you're reading in the papers about universities that have lost 40, 50, 60, 80 million dollars, they're declaring financial exigencies, they're laying people off, they're cutting salaries on. None of that is expected at Valencia. I'll say, as I said last time we met, I can foresee no circumstances under which we would conduct a furlough of employees or lay off full-time employees. And with regard to part-timers, we expect to keep the normal level of part-time engagement like we would in any other year. In particular, during the summer, we've asked the deans and their colleagues in their divisions to work hard to make sure that both full-time and part-time faculty have the opportunity to work, that we have normal levels and mixes of full to part-time ratios. Not necessarily more than usual, less than, about the same. Treat people as though it were a normal year. They're just teaching in a different modality, that's all. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is because we treasure those people, full and part-time. And also because we need the capacity. Because when this enrollment surge is materializing for the fall, we're going to have shortages of staff and faculty to staff some of those sections. We're going to need everybody on deck. So our plan isn't to downsize. Our plan is to figure out, with limited resources, how to increase capacity to serve more students when they need us most.
Well, there is a conversation. I gathered some questions, and you mentioned non-furloughing as well as the summer schedule. And there are some sentiments that the planning in the summer has not been as equitable for some as others. So there's been, I recognize we've done teachers that are tenured, and then we try to focus on supplements. And then our next move was to focus on the next and then try to make sure everybody has a class. Well, what I'm feeling or hearing is, but I haven't been able to get my overload. And why can't we go back? Or some courses have been taken. And though I may not share all of that view, I respect it. And I would like to hear, where had that come from to push the summer?
So Valencia's been through, crises before, mostly hurricanes. The nice thing about a hurricane is it's over pretty quickly. It's kind of frightening when you're in it. But we've been through this before, and we've always managed to get through by looking each other in the eye and saying, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. And that's why it's important to me, and I've expressed this to campus presidents, deans, and faculty, that all the faculty and staff be treated well as we can. So this isn't a time to press your property rights to have more than the other guy. It's a time to say, we're all going to work through this together. What does that mean in terms of who gets employment and overloads and all that stuff? There is no pecking order in my mind. But if we're staffed correctly, then there's ample demand for tenured and annual contract faculty to teach as they need to in the summer to support their families, and still to have substantial numbers of part-time faculty making load as well. And all three are important. It's not this one and then that one and then that one. It doesn't work that way. It should work to look at the whole faculty and say, what's the best way to deploy the talent we have to accomplish the things we have to accomplish? Okay? And that's true in other parts of the college as well. It's easy to think the other guy's got something I don't have. So now, is this a year to press for an overload because you're worried about the economics next year? Probably not. Probably not. There'll be some where, particularly where maybe a spouse lost a job, and a dean knows it and says, "I know you're having a rough summer. Let me see what I can do to make sure you have all that you need." Those are judgment calls I trust the deans with. So there's not a rule to inform this, The rule is we're all in this together.
I appreciate that because during this time, I happen to believe that grace is important, empathy, and recognizing that we're human. We're gonna make missteps, but I feel that is not done in an intentional way, even though my misstep,
Mm.
as good as it might be, may have an impact. I believe if we would share when someone is impacted and let us know, then they will experience the grace of saying, "Hey, I didn't know that. I'm glad you shared it with me. We'll have to do something different moving forward."
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I hear you saying. With that, how are we dealing with the federal funds that we have access to? Because I'll just throw it out there. I have heard, so fact check me, that Harvard received sums of money. And here we are in Valencia College, not to put them, well, I did put them on the spot. But what I'm really trying to ask is how are we using
Yes.
the CARES Act? I've heard about it, but I'm not sure. How does it work? Would you tell me?
Yeah, sure. So the Harvard discussion is actually a red herring. They turned the money down or said they weren't going to apply for it, as did Princeton and Yale and some of the other heavily endowed universities. So the issue for Valencia is that they awarded relief dollars to colleges to help us manage our way through the COVID-19 crisis. There are two buckets of money. Together for Valencia, they comprise just under $29 million.
Okay.
So, a little more than 10% of our normal budget. Those dollars are non-recurring, so you don't get them year in and year out, you get them once. Half of them at least must be spent on emergency aid to students whose education was disrupted in one way or another by the crisis. And
Mhm.
we've gotten just Monday our first guidance on what that means.
Okay.
The second half of that money can be used for what's called institutional stabilization, which is mostly about offsetting costs that the college has incurred in order to accommodate to. So, for example, the purchase of laptops to give to students or
Okay.
loan to students, or the purchasing of licenses for proctoring software for tests and things like that. Um, uh, it's a lot of money, actually, and it's got to be spent really intelligently, or you just kick the can down the road and create a budget crisis next year.
Okay.
So, one of the reasons the budget's not in the can yet is that we're still figuring out what to do with the federal dollars. Now, when you're in crisis, sometimes you go ahead and just make decisions.
Mm-mm.
But there's a time to pivot from that crisis and say, okay, let's get back to our normal way of doing things,
Okay.
which is Valencia is pretty collaborative.
Yes.
So I've asked some teams, design teams that are inclusive of all the constituents of the college, to be a part of sorting out what do we need to do with these resources. So there's a design team working on the student aid piece and a design team working on the institutional stabilization piece, and they'll bring back recommendations through the senior team where you and other faculty leaders sit, and we'll sort out the best we can how to layer that into the budget in a way that accomplishes our underlying goals, which is the continuity of learning of those students, and also positions us for access and equity for the coming year.
Okay. You mentioned a key word that I don't know if we all understand it because we've experienced it in a time fashion, and I'll say collaborate, or we like to collaborate here at Valencia. And what that means usually is decisions start to flow down. We have conversation, we feel ownership. You mentioned in crisis, sometimes you didn't say it like this, but what I heard was the collaboration may shrink. It doesn't go away. And now you're saying we're going to go back to it. And so I'll ask you the question is we get through summer, we've established we're going to be online and present. How are we going to collaborate our way through to know what fall looks like? What's
Mm.
your current best view? Because people are already trying to solve that. And
Yeah.
I have tended to tell them, let's kind of stay a little while longer in summer, even though, yes, fall preparation may be coming in the next 4 to 7 days. So how do you answer that? Because I want to know, am I coming back? I've got an elderly person or I'm compromised. What will you do to ensure our safety,
Mm.
security, and supporting students, faculty, staff?
Yep. Good
It's
questions.
overwhelming.
Yeah, and every enterprise in the country is in the world is trying to sort that out. How safe is safe, and how do you know it's safe, and safe for whom, and safe when, and so on. So that is a collaborative conversation, and we've already distributed and got wonderful response to a Qualtrics survey of over 300 of the faculty and staff responded with their notions about what would signal safety to you, what tells you it's okay to return to face environments, and what do those environments need to look like for you to feel safe. So we've collected a lot of information on that. So that internal information is really helpful to us. There's also a lot of external information to process. And as you know, there are all sorts of sources for that information, some more reliable than others. My favorite sources are ones that are outside of government and politics and are in the science end of things. So you know that I serve on the board of Orlando Health and have for 18 years. I have deep relationships with all of the leadership and many of the docs there, and I'm using them pretty heavily to
Okay.
inform me on where are we with regard to the infection rates, what is safe, what practices really are safe and what aren't, how useful are things like gloves and masks and temperature
Okay.
checks and all those sorts of things. So we're gathering that kind of information, and we may actually formalize a relationship with medical experts like that to help us through the next year. And I think we have at least a year of this kind of work to do at one level or another. It's not going to be like flipping a switch or blowing the whistle at the swimming pool and saying everybody back in the pool. It's going to be graded, phased adjustments that we make as things become safe and plausible. And as the demand from students tells us what makes them feel safe as
Mm-hmm.
well. So there's a lot of work to do on that. Here's what I know so far.
Okay.
Um, we are on remote, working at least through July 31st.
All right.
Summer is in the can. We know what it's going to be.
All right.
I'm contemplating and asking for feedback, mostly from student affairs, about moving the deadline for fall registration a little later,
Okay.
two,
Why?
2 or 3 weeks, to give us time to revisit the fall schedule and all of our processes in a less hurried manner. So, you know, urgency is the enemy of collaboration sometimes. So, in order to create the opportunity to collaborate, we need more time. So, I'm asking them to consider pushing those dates back to give us a few more weeks to figure out what does the transition from summer into fall look like? What should the fall schedule look like? Within that collaborative framework, we've also established two new work teams.
Okay. Tell
Uh,
me about it.
so, one is a design team whose purpose is to figure out what guidance do we give to deans and discipline coordinators and others in the college about the fall schedule, and what kind of innovation do we want to encourage. So, there are lots of possibilities there. People are really interested in synchronous uh, courses at a distance, so online synchronous. People are interested in different lengths of term. People are interested in block scheduling so that you have fewer contacts but for longer during the day. So moving from hiding from everybody to limiting the population exposure by limiting the number of people you see in a given day. There's lots of interest in expanding hybrid, so you have fewer contacts with that student in a week, but you get some face to face. There's interest in figuring out what comes on campus early
Mm-hmm.
because face to face is required and we can make it safe versus what comes on campus much, much later. And at any rate, I think we're likely to see just in demand a shift from about 1 in 3 classes being
Mm-hmm.
online historically in the last few years to perhaps 1 in 2. Whether that happens in the fall or the spring, I'm not sure yet.
Okay.
We will be consulting and transparent about all this through the summer. I think we'll build a schedule because we have to in the next few weeks. I urge flexibility, and the flexibility we need is in case there's a second wave, which there will be. It's not there's no scenario I can read about in the science of this that suggests there won't be a second wave. There's like a 75% chance of it. Now, it's going to be a lot less severe than the first wave if we handle this correctly
Mm.
and won't require exactly the same management.
Okay.
But there's likely to be one, and it's likely to peak in November.
Okay.
That assumes that we do all the right things now as a community. and it should be very manageable. But we need to be ready to change modality, change schedule, change the way we work pretty quickly if those projections aren't correct. So we're going to have to continue to be nimble and responsive. Last thing I'll say about all that is that the fall will require us to be sensitive to individual challenges as well.
Okay.
The faculty have been amazing in adjusting to the unique stories and challenges of their students. We'll have to do the same thing with our staff and faculty. So some are going to feel very comfortable and be very low risk and know how to handle themselves and be able to go right back into the workplace. Others are going to be vulnerable or have close family members who are vulnerable, and we're going to have to learn how to accommodate that. Some are just going to be fearful until they see some time pass that makes them comfortable. All that's still going to have to be managed. We're going to have to manage that in part by surrendering, Stanton, a habit we have in academia.
All right, tell me about this habit.
So the habit is if we ever do something, it sets a precedent, and we're going to have to do it from now on.
True.
And we just can't think that way. We're responding to a dynamic situation. We're going to try things. We're going to do things out of necessity. We're going to innovate in some ways, and we're going to have to step back and evaluate them and say, okay, how does that work going forward? Because it may not work going forward. It may not be the preferred way to do things. We'll do that together. That's the beauty of collaborative design, is that you engage the conversation, not the politics. You engage the decision, not the fears.
Well, what I'm hearing, or what I want to hear, is that it sounds like trust is going to grow bigger than maybe it has grown before, and it's got to be mutual trust. And I think sometimes when I use that word trust, it seems like I'm asking you to blindly invest in me. And that's not what I mean. I mean trust, to trust that when I share with you a fear or a concern, I will trust being quiet and listening to my colleague to understand. I will trust that we all have different roles. And I'll trust that if there's something that is not morally or ethically correct, or just put me in a place where I'm not easy, I'm going to trust that I could reach out and just say, hey, this has impacted me this way. What can we do about it?
Mm.
So, and in one of the meetings, I like this term, and I want to try to use it more, is the current best view,
Mm.
meaning today, because as you said, this is fluid, it's dynamic. What we knew 40 days ago, some rolled out right, and in other ways it hasn't. So I'm hearing you really say it's going to take a heavy lifting of trust.
Uh, I certainly feel that. Uh, More than ever, I felt that it's impossible to function in an environment like this as a micromanager. I'm not a micromanager. I wasn't born that way. Some people are wired to have high control needs. I'm not. And I'm so grateful for that in moments like this, because there's no way I can do what has to be done for this college. I have to trust people who are close to the students and close to the staff and faculty and close to the transactions that we engage with them and the relationships we build to come together, agree in principle on what it is we're trying to accomplish, and some better ways to get it done, and then trust them to go do it. And we won't always do things the way they won't do them the way I would. I wouldn't do them the way they would. We'll learn from each other and grow from that. I think really the trust is how to say this. For years we were taught what we really need are leaders that we can trust.
Mm,
We know, and we are continually disappointed.
right.
I think just as important, maybe more important, is we need leaders who trust us
I like it.
to do the work we're commissioned to do.
I like
Yeah, and it's communal work, but communal work requires that kind of trust.
it. Well,
The last thing I'd like to say today is, and we haven't answered a whole lot of the granular questions. Thank you for collecting more than 60 of them.
oh, you're welcome. Reaching out to faculty
Right.
is what they expect.
Yep.
So,
I
thank you.
think those we'll try to answer more in writing, because writing is clearer. And
Yes.
people might hear things that I didn't say if I'm not careful about some of these details. But I want to speak to the mental health of the community. And by that, I'm not just talking about the individual responses people may be having to tragedies in their own families or fear of tragedies in their families or just the unknown, but also our collective sense of that.
Okay.
And so, again, we weren't made for to be in crisis for long, long periods of time. We were meant to have this flight or fight response,
Mm-hmm.
our cortisol chemistry in us, to deal with that saber-toothed tiger for about 2 minutes, and then spend the next 3 weeks hunting and gathering
Right.
peacefully. Right? That's the way we're made. And so now we're experiencing sustained stress, and it's not
Mm-hmm.
healthy for us. The antidote to that is, for the most part, I think, is information and hope.
Okay.
So with trust goes hope. And I think we each have to find where our sources of hope are in the information, in our family, in our relationships, in our colleagues, and so on. But I'd like to close, if you'll forgive me for this, with sharing a poem about hope.
Well, Adam, I'm not going to have to worry about forgiving you. Anytime someone's talking about hope, I personally want to hear about hope. So please
Thanks.
end us with a poem.
So this is not one of mine. This is a poem I also sent out to our students, but it's from a friend of Valencia. David White has been here more than once. He's a wonderful, amazing man and speaker and a brilliant poet. And this is one of his poems that I treasure. It's called Everything is Waiting for You.
All right.
It's about hope when you feel alone. Your great mistake is to act the drama as if you were alone, as if life were a progressive and cunning crime, with no witness to the tiny hidden transgressions. To feel abandoned is to deny the intimacy of your own surroundings. Surely even you at times have felt the grand array, the swelling presence and the chorus crowding out your solo voice. You must note the way the soap dish enables you, or the window latch grants you freedom. Alertness is the hidden discipline of familiarity. The stairs are your mentor of things to come. The doors have always been there to frighten you and to invite you. And the tiny speaker in the phone is your dream ladder to divinity. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good in you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that hope.
I invite everybody to do just what David said. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation, just as we have today. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.